Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Winnells, and tonight we are talking about the Thugs, a secret cult of assassins. But before we get into that, I do want to point you all to the show's webpage. That is spookyasshit.com or spookyas.com. They both take you to the same place, and that is the show's blog page. From there, you can listen to each and every episode. You can also find links to all of our social media. We are at Spooky Ass Shit on both Twitter and Instagram, and you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. When you're there, don't forget to join our secret closed group, the Spookaroos. Speaking of Twitter, if you are someone who has reached out to me on Twitter, I do apologize. I just checked it tonight. Apparently, I have not actually logged into Twitter since November. So it's taken me a little while to get back to some people. I am not a big Twitter user. I am much more up to date with Facebook and Instagram. So if you're trying to reach me, those two venues are better. And you can also, of course, email the show at spookyasshit@gmail.com. And I'll get those and respond to you as quickly as I can. A little update to last week's episode about Hannah Duston. I went and did a field trip to Haverhill, and I visited the statue once again and took some pictures so I could post them on the website and on the Facebook page and Instagram. And I also went into that gift shop that I mentioned on the episode. Now, that gift shop is not specifically a Hannah Duston gift shop. It's not like there's a little tacky gift shop right at the edge of the statue or anything. It's actually in the public library, and it's a Friends of the Library gift shop. Now, when I was there several years ago, I would guess probably around 2013 or so, sometime around there. That was the first time I'd gone to visit Haverhill, and I stopped in and checked out the statue and this little shop and everything. They had a few more Hannah Duston items, including the bobblehead that I spoke of, which, by the way, is not dripping blood, as opposed to the Lizzie Borden one, which is dripping blood. There was no bobblehead this time. In fact, they had a couple postcards with the statue on it, and they had like a maybe 14 inches or so tall figurine, kind of a statue kind of thing, porcelain, of the Hannah Duston statue, but surprisingly not the one that's actually in Haverhill. They had a version of the one that you find in New Hampshire, the one holding the scalps. That was $50, so I did not go home with that. But the bobblehead is not available, so if you do happen to have the Hannah Duston bobblehead, I suppose it's quite a collector's item at this point, but it is no longer for sale. All right, no fooling around tonight. We're going to dive right into our subject. So, what do you picture when I say the word thug? Go ahead and think about it for a moment. No judgment. Just picture whatever you think a thug looks like. Hold that image in your head. I won't try to guess what you've conjured up in your imagination, but I will bet that you don't picture an Indian man wearing a yellow scarf. But that's exactly what the word thug originally described, from the 1300s up until the early 20th century. The thugs were not a single group. The term was used to describe roving groups of murderous bandits who, though separate from each other, spoke their own secret language when speaking to each other, and murdered their victims in the same way. Their victims were normally religious pilgrims on the road to visit a sacred holy site. The thugs would often pose as fellow travelers, and either ask for some kind of help, or offer some kind of help to their intended victim. Once they had gained their victim's trust, a thug would creep up behind the victim and strangle them using the yellow scarf I just mentioned. As one thug strangled the victim, the others would leap in and assist by holding down the victim's limbs to keep them from struggling. Once the victim was dead, the thugs would rob them, and then usually attempt to hide the body. Though most thugs avoided the use of knives or other weapons that would draw blood, for reasons we'll get into later, some sects of thugs did use knives to dismember the body in an effort to make hiding it easier. Oftentimes, using the guise of hospitality, the thugs would offer their victims a drink which had been drugged, causing the victim to be confused and drowsy. This method of killing, known as thuggy, is what set the thugs apart from your ordinary murderers and highwaymen. Groups of thugs would be comprised of both men and women, and a lot of times it was kind of a family business that was inherited and passed down through generations. Although this wasn't always true, some people would turn to the thug lifestyle, thuggee, out of necessity. They were poor and had no other means to earn money or survive, so they joined up with these bandits, these bandit families, these bandit tribes. The leadership of the group tended to be run by families. A certain family would be in charge, and it would pass down through the bloodline, although sometimes there were kind of co-leaders within the same family for a group of thugs. And if you grew up in a family of thugs, you would be taught, of course, by your family. And if you were someone off the street, they would take you in as long as you were willing to, participate in thuggee. And you would be taught thuggee by the elders of your band of thugs. Some sects of thugs had more rules than others, but most tribes, I guess is what we'll call them, for lack of a better term, avoided killing women, children, holy men, the poor, the sick, musicians, dancers, and the British. There's different reasons for why that is true. Some of them are holy reasons, and some of them are just because they were afraid it would cause them to be more likely to get caught, which is why they stayed away from the British. If you killed a white guy, people would probably become upset and come looking for them. If you just killed a religious pilgrim, Muslim, or Hindu, it seemed less likely that the wrath of the government would come down upon you. Because at this time, don't forget, the government was British. The earliest record that we have for the thugs comes to us from about 1356. Sometime around that year, a book entitled History of Firoz Shah was written. The book tells of a 13th century sultan of Delhi whose men had captured a member of the thug. The sultan told the prisoner that if he told him where the rest of the thugs could be found, then the sultan would show him mercy and not kill a single one of them. On the other hand, if this one thug did not tell the sultan where his tribe could be found, then the captured thug would be executed immediately, and the rest of his tribe would be hunted down and killed soon enough. The prisoner gave up his tribe, which numbered over 1,000 members. But the sultan kept his word. He did not kill a single thug. Instead, he rounded them all up and shipped them south to a more remote part of India. Other than this, most reports of thugs come to us from the British, which began colonizing India. In a simplified form, there were basically 3 types of thugs. There were Hindu thugs, Muslim thugs, and river thugs, which could be Muslim or Hindu. Naming thugs after their supposed religion is a bit misleading because thugs would often pretend to be any number of faiths to gain trust over their victims. So they might have said that they were Muslim, but they weren't really Muslim. They might have said that they were Hindu, but they weren't really Hindu. It's a whole thing. Hindu thugs considered themselves children of the Hindu goddess Kali. The thug interpretation of Kali differs from traditional versions of the goddess's story, but their creation story goes like this. The goddess Durga was attacked by 2 demons. Durga was so enraged by this attack that her skin changed color. She furrowed her brow, and from her forehead emerged the fierce Kali. Kali's skin is dark blue. She is gaunt with shrunken eyes. Her tongue sticks out from her mouth. In these ways, she resembled a corpse. She also had 4 arms, sometimes 8, that each carried a sword or a noose. She wears tiger skins and a skirt made of severed arms and a garland of human heads around her neck. Kali had immediately destroyed the demons who had attacked Durga, but soon other demons joined the fray. Durga and Kali were attacked by an especially powerful demon called Raktiba. The problem was that Raktiba had a special power. Every time his enemy drew blood and allowed it to hit the ground, another Raktiba would be created fully formed right there on the spot. Soon, the battlefield was covered with clones of Raktiba. That's when an idea occurred to Kali. If she mortally wounded each clone, then drank the blood from those wounds before it could touch the ground, she could prevent Raktiba from respawning. So this was her new battle strategy. And to be extra safe, Kali even devoured some of her enemies. Her plan worked, and eventually she and Durga won the day. This story is why, supposedly, some Hindu thugs would not use knives to commit murder, because they didn't want to spill the blood of their enemies and possibly allow them to create clones of themselves. They were honoring the goddess Kali. Thugs believed that they had a positive role in saving human lives through murder. Without the thug's ritual sacrifice, Kali might become so enraged at mankind that she would rise up and destroy all mankind in an effort to quench her thirst for blood. That's how the thugs interpreted her story anyway. More accurately, that's how the British claimed that the thugs interpreted Kali. Hinduism, obviously, is a very rich and complicated religion, and explaining its nuances is beyond the scope of this episode and beyond my personal knowledge. But I would like to point out that, though she does have a fearsome appearance, Kali is essentially a protective goddess. To say that she is a quote-unquote good guy is an oversimplification, but not entirely inaccurate. She is a fierce warrior, born of rage, who fights demons while looking rather frightening herself. In other words, she's our kind of girl. So obviously Kali is a very complex figure in Hinduism and perhaps appropriate subject for an episode fully on her own. I do recall that several years back, I forget exactly when, but a few years back, Heidi Klum, who is known for her legendary Halloween costumes that she puts on every year for her big Halloween party, she actually dressed as Kali one year. And there were some Hindu groups that were very, very offended by this because they're saying, you know, this is our goddess, not a Halloween costume. I'll leave you to your own thoughts on that, but I will post a picture on Instagram of Heidi Klum in her Kali costume and let you be the judge. Now, the Muslim thugs, of course, believed in a monotheistic faith, but they too used the story of Durga and Kali as justification for their actions. They believed that Durga was a sacred spirit, subordinate to Allah. They did not pray to Durga or Kali, but they worshipped them. Eventually, Muslim thugs assimilated Durga with Islamic prophet Muhammad's daughter, Fatima, who, in their version of the story, killed the demon Raktiba and started the sacred practice of Thuggee. So, to my reoccurring guest co-host, Fatima, if you're out there, Fatima Elmi, did you know that you were named after, possibly, the very first thug? She's still mad at me about the whole salad fingers thing, by the way, which, another update, he's made a new episode. There's an episode 11 now. I did let Fatima know. I said, hey, there's a new episode of Salad Fingers we got to watch. She did not find that amusing. So we'll see if she ever comes back on the show. Anyway, back to our story. The British first encountered the thugs in South India in 1807. 2 years later, bands of thugs were reported in northern India as well, and the British began to put measures in place to eradicate the thugs and end the practice of Thuggee, with the first official efforts taking place between 1809 and 1812. For the rest of the 19th century, British authorities occasionally captured and prosecuted thugs, and stories of their secret society of killers fascinated the British public. Superintendent William Sleeman was placed in charge of ending the thugs' reign of terror. He seemed to have been the first to realize that information obtained from one group of thugs might be used to track down and identify other groups of thugs in different parts of the country. His first major break was the capture of Ferengi, also known as Saeed Amir Ali. He was persuaded to turn on other thugs. Ferengi's story was turned into a successful novel in 1839 under the title Confessions of a Thug. Ferengi brought Sleeman to a mass grave with hundreds of bodies and told him the circumstances of the murders and the names of the thugs who had taken part in it. After initial investigation confirmed that what Ferengi had said was true, Sleeman began an extensive campaign using profiling and criminal intelligence. The government of India established the Thug and Dosity Department in 1835, with Sleeman himself running the department. The campaign relied heavily on captured thugs who became informants. These informants were offered protection on the condition that they told the government everything that they knew. And it worked. The river thugs, being by their nature more nomadic than the other bands of thugs, were able to evade the British authorities years after the land-bound brothers were captured, but eventually they too were betrayed by one of their own, and forces under the command of Sleeman hunted them down and eradicated them. According to British authorities, by the 1870s, the thug cults were essentially extinct. But the history of Thuggee led to the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. This criminal act was repealed when India gained its independence in 1950, and organized crime still exists in India today, but there is no group known as the Thugs or any groups known to practice Thuggee. In fact, most of the organized crime that I've read about in India has to do with Bollywood, interestingly enough. Now, there's just one little problem with this whole history of Thuggee. It may be complete bullshit. Nearly all the reports we have about the bands of thugs roaming India come to us from British sources. Numerous historians have described Thuggee as basically an invention of the British colonial regime. The stories of thug cults in the 19th century may well have been born out of a British fear of the little-known interior of India and their limited understanding of the religious and social practices of the natives. In other words, it may have been racist propaganda used to justify the British colonization of India. Of course, that's not to say that bandits and thieves and murderers don't exist in India. Of course they do, just like everywhere else. But perhaps it's possible that the British saw this and saw statues depicting Kali and kind of let their imaginations run wild. Now, honestly, I don't know enough about Indian history or British history in colonizing India to really make a judgment here, but I just thought it was worth noting that although it's an interesting story, it very well may be bullshit. And that about does it. That's all the notes I have. Sometimes you take notes and they look really long, and then you read them out and you see, hey, that only took a little bit of time. It was not really quite a full episode, what we normally try to do of 40 minutes at least. So this is a little bit of a shorty. But don't worry, next time I come back, I'll probably have a longer episode. And besides, I've been giving you guys some hour-plus episodes lately, so I deserve a little bit of a break. And I'm sure, you don't mind too much either. Brevity is the soul of wit, as Shakespeare once told us. So I hope you all enjoyed today's brief episode. And once again, check out the website, SpookyAssShit or SpookyAS.com. Find us on Facebook at Facebook.com/SpookyAS. And you can join the Spookaroos there if you're a true blue Spookaroo. Don't forget, t-shirts, tote bags, stickers, they're all on sale on the website thanks to TeePublic. You can search Spookaroo in TeePublic, or you can find direct links on the website. And of course, thank you once again for listening. I learned recently through a different podcast that I listened to that according to statistics, 200,000 new podcasts were launched just last year. So again, I'll point out that the fact that you found my humble little show recorded right here in my living room, that is basically a baby Jesus miracle. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen. And I would especially appreciate it if you could write a nice review on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever else you happen to be listening from. And even more than that, I would love it if you could tell a friend and turn them onto the show. You must know somebody just as spooky as yourself. And if you don't know anybody, well, that's a good reason to join the Spookaroos, because you'll get to know some people there, or maybe you belong to some other online communities where you could share the show and grow our infamy. So, having said all that, once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be afraid.